Amara sat on the rickety wooden bench outside her small, clay-walled home, gazing into the horizon. The faint orange glow of the setting sun cast long shadows across the village, and her heart felt heavy. At 20 years old, she was at the prime of her youth, her smooth ebony skin radiant, her dark almond-shaped eyes shimmering with quiet intensity, but her life felt stagnant. Opportunities were few in her remote village, and the weight of poverty pressed down on her like an unshakable burden. So when the job offer came to work as a nanny for the wealthy Tund family on the outskirts of the forest, she saw it as a lifeline. The Tund family compound was unlike anything Amara had seen before. Surrounded by tall bamboo fences and lush greenery, the house was large, painted a crisp white, and adorned with ornate carvings on the doors and windows. The sounds of birds chirping and the faint cries of newborns greeted her as she approached the gate for the first time. The sight of it made her heart race with excitement. Inside the compound, she met Ifeoma, the lady of the house. Ifeoma was beautiful, with soft, glowing skin and a motherly warmth that made Amara feel welcome. Despite recently giving birth to twin boys, Ifeoma carried herself with grace, though her body still bore signs of the exhaustion from labor. She smiled at Amara with kindness as she showed her around the house. "I need someone I can trust," Ifeoma said, her voice gentle but firm. "My twins, Obina and Shinonso, are my world. Please, care for them as though they were your own." Amara nodded eagerly, promising herself she would do her best. At that moment, she felt a glimmer of hope. She was determined to prove her worth, not just to the family, but to herself. Later, she met Tund, the patriarch of the household. Tund was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a deep, soothing voice and a warm smile. He held his twins with practiced ease, his gaze filled with adoration as he rocked them gently. Amara felt her breath catch as he introduced himself. "Welcome to our home, Amara," Tund said, his smile making her heart flutter. "We're happy to have you here." In the days that followed, Amara quickly settled into her role. She fed the twins, sang them lullabies, and carried them around the house as Ifeoma rested and regained her strength. The children took to her immediately, their tiny hands reaching for her as she cradled them. The warmth of their affection filled her with joy. But as she worked, Amara couldn't help but notice the love and harmony between Tund and Ifeoma. The way he looked at his wife with admiration, the way he whispered sweet words to her when he thought no one was listening, it stirred something dark within Amara. She had never known such love, and she began to resent the life Ifeoma had. Why should Ifeoma have everything? A loving husband, beautiful children, and a life of comfort? Meanwhile, she, Amara, was destined to toil for scraps? The thoughts gnawed at her, feeding a growing bitterness. Every time she saw Tund smile at his wife, a pang of envy shot through her. Every laugh they shared felt like a taunt. She began to linger in Tund's presence, making excuses to talk to him. She laughed at his jokes, leaned in just a little too close, and soaked in every glance he gave her, no matter how fleeting. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest behind the compound became cloaked in shadow, Amara overheard a conversation between Tund and Mama Agatha, his elderly mother. "I worry for Ifeoma," Mama Agatha said, her voice low and thoughtful. "The forest spirits stir when envy grows within a home. Keep your household united, my son. Protect your family from those who might wish them harm." Tund had laughed softly, brushing off his mother's concerns. "Mama, you worry too much. There's no one here who would harm us." But Amara's heart raced at those words. The forest spirits. The idea lingered in her mind long after the conversation ended, filling her with unease. The villagers often spoke of the dense forest beyond the compound as a place of mystery and danger, where spirits walked among the living and dark forces could be summoned. That night, Amara stared at the ceiling of her small room, her thoughts a chaotic whirl. She clenched her hands into fists, the seed of jealousy taking root deep within her soul. She wanted what Ifeoma had. No matter the cost. Amara's new life should have felt like a blessing. She was employed by one of the most respected families in the region, surrounded by warmth and care, and adored by the twin boys she watched over. Yet, the growing bitterness in her heart turned every smile she saw between Tund and Ifeoma into a dagger. The days passed, but her jealousy only grew. She started noticing every little detail, how Tund would touch Ifeoma's hand while passing her a cup of water, the way they shared knowing glances when their children giggled. To Amara, these small acts of love felt like sharp reminders of everything she lacked. The fire of envy burned brighter each time. It was on one of her visits to the bustling market square that Amara's dark thoughts began to take shape. She had gone to fetch groceries for the family when she overheard two women gossiping near the spice vendor's stall. "They say Baba Kalum's magic is real," one woman whispered, her voice low but tinged with awe. "A young girl went to him last year, begging for her lover to leave his wife. And it worked. The man abandoned his home and married her within a month." "Do you think it's true?" the other woman asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and fear. "I've heard his spirits demand heavy payment." "Of course it's true," the first woman replied. "But Baba Kalum's magic is not for the faint of heart. The forest spirits don't forgive mistakes." Amara felt a shiver run down her spine as she listened. She had heard of Baba Kalum, the infamous witch doctor who lived deep in the forest, but she had never dared to seek him out. The forest was said to be alive, a place where light rarely penetrated and whispers danced on the wind. The very thought of venturing there made her stomach churn. But as she walked back to the compound, the idea began to take root. If Baba Kalum could truly make someone love her, wasn't it worth the risk? What did she have to lose? Amara began testing the waters. She started sowing tiny seeds of discord within the household. When Tund asked about the twins' toys, she claimed Ifeoma had misplaced them. When Ifeoma prepared dinner, Amara subtly oversalted the soup before serving it, making Tund frown as he ate. "Maybe you're just tired," Amara suggested one evening, her voice soft and sympathetic, as Ifeoma fretted over why the twins wouldn't stop crying. "Maybe," Ifeoma murmured, though doubt flickered in her eyes. Amara began spending more time in Tund's presence, offering to bring him tea or staying in the room longer than necessary under the guise of caring for the twins. Though Tund was polite, she noticed small moments, a chuckle at one of her jokes, a lingering glance, that fueled her delusions. One afternoon, Mama Agatha arrived at the compound. The elderly woman's presence always brought a sense of calm, her faith and wisdom radiating like sunlight through the darkest clouds. She carried a basket of herbs and fruit, humming a hymn as she entered the house. "Amara, my dear," she said warmly, handing her a small pouch of dried herbs. "Make tea with this for Ifeoma. It will help her regain her strength." Amara nodded, feeling a strange discomfort in the older woman's presence. Mama Agatha's sharp eyes seemed to see straight through her, as though she could sense the storm brewing within her soul. That evening, Mama Agatha sat with Tund and Ifeoma, her voice calm but serious. "This is a blessed home," she said, looking at each of them in turn. "But blessings attract envy, and envy invites danger. You must guard your family, Tund. Pray together, and stay vigilant." Her words struck a chord in Ifeoma, who nodded solemnly. But Amara, standing in the shadows, felt her resolve harden. Mama Agatha's warnings were nothing more than superstition. She wouldn't let them deter her. Amara's obsession with Tund deepened with each passing day. She began dreaming of him, waking up with his name on her lips. The love she imagined between them felt more real than the bond he shared with Ifeoma. In her mind, Ifeoma was the only thing standing in the way of her happiness. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the forest began to hum with the sounds of night, Amara sat alone in her small room. Her thoughts turned to Baba Kalum. The tale she had overheard at the market played in her mind like a siren's song. She knew it was dangerous, but the temptation was too strong. "I deserve love," she whispered to herself, clutching the hem of her dress. "I deserve to be happy." She made her decision. The next morning, as she washed clothes in the courtyard, Amara noticed the forest at the edge of the compound. Its towering trees loomed like silent sentinels, their thick canopy casting a deep shadow over the earth below. The villagers always avoided it, speaking in hushed tones about the spirits said to roam within. But Amara's fear had been dulled by her growing desperation. She would visit Baba Kalum. He would help her, no matter the cost. As the day wore on, she kept glancing toward the forest, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and anticipation. That night, when the household was quiet and the twins were fast asleep, she slipped out of the compound and into the darkness. The forest welcomed her with an unnatural chill, the air thick and heavy. Shadows danced on the edges of her vision, and the sound of her footsteps seemed unnaturally loud. But she pressed on, drawn by the promise of what lay ahead. Somewhere deep in the heart of the forest, Baba Kalum awaited her. The night was heavy with silence as Amara pushed deeper into the forest, the faint glow of the moon barely piercing the thick canopy above. The air felt unnaturally cold, and every step she took seemed to echo louder than it should. Shadows stretched and twisted around her, as if the trees themselves were alive, watching her trespass into their domain. Amara clutched the lantern in her trembling hand, its flickering flame her only comfort. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears, but her resolve was unwavering. She had made up her mind, she would find Baba Kalum, no matter how far she had to go. After what felt like hours of walking, the path narrowed, and the trees grew denser. Then, suddenly, the forest opened into a small clearing. There, in the center, stood a decrepit hut made of straw and rotting wood. The structure leaned precariously to one side, its walls adorned with strange charms, bones, feathers, and beads strung together in patterns that seemed to pulse faintly in the moonlight. A faint smell of burning herbs and something acrid, almost metallic, filled the air, making Amara's stomach churn. She hesitated at the edge of the clearing, her instincts screaming for her to turn back. But her desire for Tund was stronger than her fear. Gathering her courage, she approached the hut and knocked lightly on the door. It creaked open on its own, revealing a dim interior lit by a single oil lamp. The walls were lined with shelves cluttered with jars of powders, dried herbs, and unidentifiable objects that glimmered in the faint light. Sitting cross-legged on a mat in the center of the room was Baba Kalum. He was an old man, his face lined with deep wrinkles, his skin the color of charcoal. His eyes were milky white, unseeing yet piercing, as if he could peer directly into Amara's soul. Around his neck hung a necklace of animal teeth, and his bony hands rested on his knees, covered in strange scars that looked like ancient symbols. "I've been expecting you," Baba Kalum rasped, his voice low and gravelly. "The forest whispered your name to me." Amara froze. How could he know her name? She opened her mouth to speak but found no words. "Speak, child," he said, his tone impatient. "The spirits do not wait for the indecisive." I need your help," Amara stammered. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the oppressive stillness of the hut, it felt deafening. "There is a man. Tund. I want him to love me. To forget his wife and be mine." A slow, crooked smile spread across Baba Kalum's face, revealing teeth yellowed with age. "Love," he said, almost mockingly. Such a simple word, yet it drives humans to madness. "And you are already halfway there." Amara swallowed hard, her hands clenching the hem of her dress. "Can you help me or not?" Baba Kalum chuckled softly, the sound low and unsettling. "Of course, I can help you. But love cannot be stolen without consequence. Are you prepared to pay the price?" Amara hesitated. "What price?" The spirits demand balance, Baba Kalum said, leaning forward. The light of the oil lamp cast eerie shadows across his face, making him look almost inhuman. What you take, you must give. If you wish to bend a man's heart to your will, the spirits will require something of equal value. I'll pay whatever they ask, Amara said quickly, desperation lacing her voice. She didn't care about consequences, all she could think about was Tun's smile, his touch, his love. Baba Kalum nodded, as if satisfied by her answer. He reached behind him and pulled out a small, gnarled bottle filled with a thick, dark liquid. It swirled unnaturally, the color shifting between deep red and black as if alive. This is what you seek, he said, handing her the bottle. Pour it into his food or drink for 7 days. By the 7th day, his love for his wife will turn to hatred, and his heart will belong to you. Amara reached for the bottle, but Baba Kalum held it back. His expression darkened, and his voice dropped to a near growl. But heed this warning, girl, once the spirits are called, they cannot be dismissed. If you falter, if you hesitate, they will claim more than you can imagine. Amara nodded, her throat dry. I understand. Satisfied, Baba Kalum handed her the bottle. Go, then. The spirits will watch. As Amara stepped out of the hut, the air seemed heavier, the forest darker than before. The shadows seemed to stretch toward her, whispering faintly in a language she couldn't understand. She clutched the bottle tightly, her fingers trembling as she made her way back through the trees. The journey back to the compound was slower, each step weighed down by a sense of foreboding. The whispers in the forest grew louder, and at one point, she thought she saw a pair of glowing eyes watching her from the shadows. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest. By the time she reached the compound, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. The sight of the familiar house filled her with relief, but a small part of her felt as though she had left something of herself behind in the forest. As she slipped back into her room, she placed the bottle carefully under her bed and sat on the edge, staring at it. The spirits had given her the means to make Tund hers. All she had to do was follow through. But deep in the pit of her stomach, a flicker of doubt began to grow. The following morning, the compound hummed with its usual routine. Birds chirped in the garden, the twins babbled in their cribs, and Ifeoma hummed softly as she prepared breakfast. But Amara's heart was racing as she stood in the kitchen, the gnarled bottle of Baba Kalum's potion tucked discreetly into the pocket of her apron. Her hands trembled as she prepared Tund's tea. The liquid inside the bottle was thick and dark, its consistency unnatural. As she carefully tipped a few drops into the steaming cup, she felt a cold chill sweep through the room. It was brief, gone as quickly as it had come, but it left her uneasy. She carried the tea to the dining table, where Tund was reading the morning paper. He looked up with a warm smile as she set the cup before him. "Thank you, Amara," he said, taking a sip. Amara watched him intently, her breath caught in her throat. But Tund didn't seem to notice anything unusual. He continued reading, oblivious to the tiny seed of darkness that had just been planted within him. The first few days passed without incident, and Amara began to doubt whether the potion was working. But on the 4th day, she noticed the first change. It was a small thing, Tund snapping at Ifeoma over something trivial. She had asked him if he could help fix a loose hinge on the nursery door, and his response had been sharp and dismissive. "I'll get to it when I have time, Ifeoma," he had said, his tone harsher than Amara had ever heard before. Ifeoma looked taken aback, her eyes brimming with hurt, but she said nothing and quietly walked away. Amara, watching from the corner of the room, felt a flicker of satisfaction. As the days went on, Tund's temper grew shorter. He began arguing with Ifeoma more frequently, criticizing her cooking, her parenting, even the way she dressed. The warmth in his eyes whenever he looked at her seemed to dim, replaced by a coldness that Amara had never seen before. It wasn't just Tund who was changing. The house itself seemed to shift under the weight of the dark magic. The twins, once calm and cheerful, began crying at odd hours of the night, their wails piercing through the walls. No amount of rocking or soothing seemed to help, and Ifeoma's exhaustion deepened with each sleepless night. The air in the house grew heavy, almost suffocating. Shadows seemed to linger in the corners longer than they should, and strange sounds, soft whispers, faint footsteps, filled the silence. One night, as Amara lay in bed, she thought she heard a faint voice calling her name. She sat up, her heart pounding, and strained to listen. But the house was silent, save for the distant cries of the twins. Shaking her head, she lay back down, convincing herself it was just her imagination. On the 6th day, Mama Agatha arrived unexpectedly at the compound. The moment she stepped through the gate, she paused, her sharp eyes scanning the house. "This place feels wrong," she said quietly, her voice filled with unease. She greeted Ifeoma warmly, embracing her daughter-in-law and cooing over the twins. But when her gaze fell on Amara, her expression grew stern. "Amara," she said, her tone unreadable. "You look tired. Is everything all right?" Amara forced a smile. "I'm fine, Mama. Just busy with the twins." But Mama Agatha's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer before she turned away. Later that evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Mama Agatha led them in prayer. Her voice was strong and steady, but her words carried an undercurrent of warning. "May this house remain blessed," she said, her eyes flicking briefly to Amara. "And may no darkness find a foothold within these walls." Amara shifted uncomfortably in her seat, the weight of the old woman's words pressing down on her. Chike, the family's loyal friend, also began to notice the changes. He often visited the compound, bringing gifts for the twins and sharing stories to lighten the mood. But recently, he had sensed tension in the air, a stark contrast to the warmth the household once radiated. One afternoon, as he played with the twins in the garden, he noticed Amara watching Tund from the kitchen window. Her gaze was intense, almost predatory, and it unsettled him. That evening, as they sat together in the living room, Chike pulled Ifeoma aside. "Something's not right," he said in a low voice. "Tund isn't himself, and the atmosphere in this house feels off. Have you noticed anything unusual?" Ifeoma hesitated, unsure how to put her unease into words. "The twins cry all the time now," she said finally. "And Tund, he's so different. I don't know what's happening." Chike frowned, his instincts telling him that something was deeply wrong. "Be careful, Ifeoma," he said. "And keep an eye on Amara. There's something strange about her." By the 6th night, the house felt like it was on the brink of collapse. Tund and Ifeoma had a heated argument over nothing, their voices echoing through the halls. The twins' cries grew louder and more frantic, and the shadows in the house seemed darker, almost alive. Amara, hiding in her room, clutched the gnarled bottle tightly. She had done everything Baba Kalum had instructed, but instead of joy, all she felt was fear. The whispers in the forest seemed to follow her, growing louder in her mind. As she sat in the darkness, she thought she heard a voice, a deep, guttural sound that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. "You cannot escape us," it said. Amara froze, her heart pounding. She turned to look at the bottle in her hands, and for the first time, she felt the weight of her actions. The morning of the 7th day dawned heavy with an unnatural stillness. The compound, usually alive with the sound of birds chirping and the babbling of the twins, seemed eerily quiet. A thick, suffocating tension hung in the air, and even the sunlight filtering through the windows felt dim and cold. Amara stood in the kitchen, staring at the gnarled bottle in her hand. It was nearly empty now, only a few drops of the thick, dark liquid remaining. Today was the final day of the ritual, the day Baba Kalum promised Tund's love would be hers. Yet, instead of excitement, she felt a deep, gnawing dread. Meanwhile, Chike had not been idle. His suspicion of Amara had grown over the past few days, and he had taken it upon himself to watch her closely. On this morning, he followed her discreetly as she moved through the compound, his sharp eyes noting how she lingered near Tund and how her presence seemed to unnerve Ifeoma. Later that afternoon, Chike overheard Amara whispering to herself in the nursery. He crept closer, pressing his ear to the door. Her words were faint, but they chilled him to the bone. "Just one more day," she murmured. "Then he'll be mine. They'll all see." Chike's heart pounded as he stepped away, his mind racing. He needed answers, and he had a feeling he knew where to find them. Chike made his way to the bustling market square, his eyes scanning the crowd for anyone who might know more about Amara. He found Miriam, a talkative vendor who often seemed to know more than she should. "Have you noticed anything strange about Amara?" he asked casually as he purchased a basket of yams. Miriam hesitated, glancing around before leaning in. "I've heard whispers," she said, her voice low. "Some say she went to see Baba Kalum in the forest. You know what that means?" Chike's stomach churned. "Baba Kalum?" Miriam nodded solemnly. "They say he deals in dark magic, that he can make a person do anything, for a price. If Amara went to him, then she's playing with fire." Chike returned to the compound, his resolve hardening with every step. He found Mama Agatha and Ifeoma in the living room, their faces drawn with worry. The twins had been crying incessantly again, their wails echoing through the house like a warning. "I need to speak to both of you," Chike said, his tone serious. He told them everything he had overheard and what Miriam had said at the market. Ifeoma's eyes widened in disbelief. "Amara? She wouldn't. She's been so kind to the twins." "She's been kind because she wants to replace you," Chike said grimly. "I'm certain she's been poisoning Tun's mind. We need to stop her before it's too late." Mama Agatha, ever calm in the face of chaos, nodded. "We'll confront her. But we must be prepared. If dark magic is involved, this is no ordinary battle." That evening, as the household settled into an uneasy quiet, Mama Agatha, Ifeoma, and Chike waited for the right moment. Amara was in the nursery, humming softly to the twins. She didn't notice when they entered the room and closed the door behind them. "Amara," Mama Agatha said, her voice steady but firm. "We need to talk." Amara turned, her face pale. "Mama, is something wrong?" "Enough lies," Chike said, stepping forward. "We know what you've been doing. We know about Baba Kalum." At the mention of the witch doctor, Amara's eyes widened in fear. She stumbled back, clutching the edge of the crib for support. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play innocent," Ifeoma said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and sadness. "You've been trying to destroy my family." Amara's resolve cracked under their piercing gazes. Tears welled up in her eyes as she sank to her knees. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. I just wanted him to love me." Mama Agatha stepped closer, her voice laced with quiet authority. "What have you done, child?" Amara broke down, confessing everything, her jealousy, her visit to Baba Kalum, and the potion she had been feeding Tund. She begged for forgiveness, but the air in the room seemed to grow colder with each word she spoke. As Amara finished her confession, a sudden gust of wind blew through the nursery, extinguishing the lamps and plunging the room into darkness. The twins' cries stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence. A deep, guttural voice echoed through the room, sending chills down their spines. "You have called us, and we have come." The shadows in the room began to move, coalescing into the shape of a towering figure with glowing eyes. It loomed over Amara, its presence suffocating. "You sought to take what was not yours," the spirit said, its voice reverberating like thunder. "Now, the balance must be restored. Amara screamed, scrambling back against the wall. No. Please, I didn't mean it. The spirit turned its gaze to Mama Agatha, Ifeoma, and Chike. The spirits demand justice. Will you fight for what is yours? Mama Agatha stepped forward, her voice unwavering. We will fight. This family will not fall to darkness. The spirit's towering figure cast a shadow over the nursery, its glowing eyes piercing through the dimness. The air was thick with a menacing energy, pressing down on everyone in the room. The twins, silent in their cribs, watched with wide, innocent eyes as if they, too, could feel the supernatural weight of the moment. Justice must be served, the spirit boomed, its voice shaking the very walls of the house. The balance has been broken, and a price must be paid. Amara cowered on the floor, trembling violently. Please, please, I'll do anything, she begged, her voice cracking. Just don't hurt me. The spirit turned its glowing eyes toward her, unmoved. The spirits care not for your pleas. You sought to bend fate to your will, and now the fate you have called will consume you. But Mama Agatha was not one to cower in the face of darkness. Her hands clutched the small leather pouch of sacred herbs she always carried, her faith a shield against fear. Spirits of the forest, she said, her voice steady and commanding. This house is under divine protection. You may punish the guilty, but the innocent will not fall to your wrath. The spirit's gaze shifted to her, its form growing larger, more menacing. You challenge us, old woman, it hissed. You would defy the balance we have decreed? I do not defy the balance, Mama Agatha replied. But I will not allow your darkness to consume this family. Leave the innocent be. The spirit hesitated, the shadows around it writhing as though unsure. Amara's actions had summoned it, but Mama Agatha's strength was unlike anything it had encountered. It loomed over her, testing her resolve, but the old woman stood firm. Suddenly, the spirit turned its attention back to Amara. You are the one who called us, it said, its voice a low growl. You will face the consequences of your greed. Before anyone could react, the shadows in the room surged forward, wrapping themselves around Amara's arms and legs. She screamed, thrashing against the invisible binds, but the spirit's grip was unrelenting. No! Please, don't take me, she cried, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean for this to happen. The shadows began to pull her toward the open window, their movements slow and deliberate. Beyond the window lay the dark expanse of the forest, the trees swaying unnaturally as though they were beckoning her. Ifeoma clutched the edge of the crib, her heart pounding. Despite everything Amara had done, she couldn't help but feel a pang of pity. What will happen to her, she asked, her voice trembling. The spirits will take her to the forest, Mama Agatha said grimly. What happens there is between her and the forces she called upon. As Amara was dragged closer to the window, Chike suddenly stepped forward. Wait, he shouted, his voice firm. If she is to pay for her sins, let her confess everything to the spirits first. The shadows paused, and the spirit seemed to consider his words. Speak, girl, it said. Confess your guilt, and we may grant you mercy. Amara's sobs were uncontrollable, her body trembling with fear. I was jealous, she cried. I wanted what Ifeoma had, her life, her love. I thought if Tund loved me, I would finally be happy. But I see now. I was wrong. I've only brought pain. The spirit's glowing eyes burned brighter, and for a moment, the shadows recoiled slightly. You speak the truth, it said. But words cannot erase what you have done. You sought to disrupt the natural order, and the balance must be restored. As the shadows pulled Amara closer to the window, the twins began to cry again, their wails piercing through the air. The spirit paused, turning its gaze toward them. The children are tainted by your actions, it said. Their innocence was touched by your greed. They, too, are part of the balance. No. Ifeoma cried, stepping in front of the cribs. They are innocent. They did nothing wrong. Mama Agatha stepped beside her, raising her pouch of herbs. You will not touch these children, she said firmly. They are protected by divine light. Begone, spirits, and leave the innocent unharmed. The spirit recoiled as Mama Agatha tossed a handful of herbs into the air, chanting a prayer under her breath. The air shimmered with a golden light, and the shadows writhed in agony, retreating from the twins. You dare to banish us, the spirit roared, its form flickering. This is not over. The shadows around Amara tightened, and she let out one final, blood-curdling scream as they pulled her through the window. The last thing the family saw was her terrified face as the forest seemed to swallow her whole. The moment she disappeared, the oppressive darkness in the house lifted. The twins' cries quieted, and the air grew warm again. The house, once suffocating, felt lighter. As though the spirit's presence had finally been purged. Mama Agatha sank into a chair, her body trembling with exhaustion. It is done, she said quietly. The spirits have taken their due. Ifeoma rushed to the twins, cradling them in her arms. Tears streamed down her face, a mix of relief and sorrow. They're safe, she whispered. Thank God, they're safe. Chike placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You're stronger than you know, Ifeoma, he said. Your love and faith protected this family. Outside, the forest was still, its usual hum of life eerily quiet. Amara was gone, her fate sealed by the spirits she had summoned. The morning after Amara's disappearance, the compound was bathed in a calm light. The eerie chill that had lingered for days was gone, replaced by the familiar warmth of the sun. The sounds of life returned, the chirping of birds, the gentle rustle of leaves in the garden. For the first time in days, peace seemed to have settled over the house. Ifeoma sat in the nursery, gently rocking the twins in her arms. Their soft coos filled the room, a far cry from the relentless cries of the past week. She kissed the top of their heads, tears slipping down her cheeks. For days, she had been consumed by fear and despair, but now her heart swelled with gratitude. Tund appeared at the doorway, his face drawn with remorse. He hesitated before stepping inside, his voice low and trembling. Ifeoma. I don't know what came over me. I've hurt you, and I'll never forgive myself for it. Ifeoma looked up at him, her eyes filled with both relief and lingering pain. It wasn't your fault, she said softly. You were under her spell. He knelt beside her, taking her hand in his. Even so, I promise I'll never let anything like this happen again. You and the boys are my everything. I'll spend the rest of my life making this right. Ifeoma nodded, her heart still tender but open to healing. They sat together, holding the twins, their bond slowly mending in the light of the new day. In the living room, Mama Agatha sat with Chike, her weathered hands wrapped around a steaming cup of herbal tea. The old woman's face was calm, but her eyes held the weight of what had transpired. Amara's envy opened the door for the spirits, she said, her voice steady. But it was our love and faith that drove them out. Chike nodded, his admiration for the older woman evident. Without you, we wouldn't have stood a chance, he said. You were fearless. Mama Agatha chuckled softly. Fearless? No, my son. I was afraid. But fear is no excuse to give in to darkness. The spirits feed on weakness. We must always protect what we hold dear with love, prayer, and unity. Chike leaned back, his expression thoughtful. Do you think Amara is gone forever? Mama Agatha's gaze drifted to the window, where the forest loomed in the distance. She is where the spirits have taken her. What happens to her now is between her and the forces she called upon. But we must pray for her soul. Even the lost deserve mercy. The events of the past week quickly spread through the village. The once vibrant and envied Amara had vanished, and the villagers whispered about her fate. Some claimed they saw shadows moving in the forest at night, others swore they heard her cries carried on the wind. The story of her jealousy and the spirit's wrath became a cautionary tale. Mothers told their daughters to guard their hearts against envy, and men whispered warnings about the dangers of meddling with the supernatural. The forest, already feared, became a place of even greater mystery and dread. As the days turned into weeks, the Tund household slowly returned to normal. The twins grew stronger, their laughter filling the halls. Ifioma and Tund worked together to rebuild their bond, leaning on Mama Agatha and Chike for support. One evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Mama Agatha raised her glass of palm wine. "To love and unity," she said, her voice warm. "May this house always be a place of light." "To love and unity," the others echoed, their voices carrying a sense of hope. On the edge of the forest, where the shadows grew long as the sun set, the air seemed to hum with an ancient power. The villagers who passed by in the evenings claimed they felt a presence watching them. Some said they saw a young woman's figure flickering between the trees, her face obscured by shadow. Though Amara was never seen again, her story lingered as a reminder: the spirits of the forest demand balance. What you take must always be replaced. One quiet night, as Ifioma rocked her twins to sleep, she gazed out of the nursery window at the dark silhouette of the forest. Her heart was full of gratitude, yet the faintest shadow of sorrow lingered for Amara. "May you find peace," she whispered softly, her words carried away by the night breeze. The forest remained still, its secrets tucked away, waiting for the next soul foolish enough to disturb its balance.